So in the Philippines, we have a saying, a proverb that goes in Tagalog, ang hindi marunong magmahal sa kanyang sariling wika ay mas masahol pa sa hayop at sa malansang isda. And in Kapampangan, masalingal-ngalyang palak, king lanam ning mebelas ang asan, ing taong alam pakamal, king amano ng siswan. And in English, those who do not know how to love their own mother tongues are far worse than a savage beast, and reeks worse than the stench of a rotten fish. But now my question is, have you ever felt ashamed of speaking your own mother tongues, your own native language? You know, maybe punished at schools, or even teased at home. So I speak both Tagalog and Kapampangan fluently. But when I was a little kid, back in the Philippines, back in Pampanga, I got punished in school for every non-Tagalog word and non-English word I spoke in the classroom. And I remember it was 1 peso for every Kapampangan word I spoke. And it wasn't just paying a fee, it was also a public embarrassment. They literally shame you in front of your peers, even though the school was literally in Angeles City, like literally in the middle of the Kapampangan homeland. Yet we were still punished for every Kapampangan word we spoke. So as a little kid, it wasn't just annoying or embarrassing, but it also taught me something deeper, that my own language, our own native language, was worthless. You see, the Philippines is home to over 180 languages, yet more than 30 of them are currently critically endangered. Like literally, dozens of our languages, our native languages, are dying to this very day, yet most Filipinos don't even notice. But here's the catch. These languages are not just fading away naturally. In fact, if you think about it, they're actively being silenced. Mabuhay, or in Kapampangan, luwid kayo. Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Kirby Araullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. And actually, welcome to our new place. We just moved in. In fact, we're still in the middle of unpacking and unboxing. But I figured I might as well record a video now, set up my library first, and then record a video now. Since today is August 1st, and August is celebrated as Buwan ng Wikang Pambansa, or the National Language Month in the Philippines. So in today's video, we're digging into why so many of our native languages are quietly disappearing. We'll look into the emotional price we pay once we lost a language. And we'll also talk about how we can start reclaiming our own mother tongues. Because no matter where you are in the world, languages shape your identity. It connects you to your family, your memories, your roots. And long before colonialism, the islands we now call the Philippines were already multilingual. Kapampangan, Cebuano, Ilocano, Tagalog, Tausug, and dozens more all coexisted without one dominating the rest. And still, trade, diplomacy, and governance thrived. So, if you think about it, diversity was never the problem. But today, across the Philippines and the diaspora, that diversity is fading, quietly. And I'm sharing this with you as someone who's been teaching our people's history and cultures through our indigenous scripts like Baybayin and Kulitan for over 15 years. So this is not the first time that I'm talking about this topic. In fact, I've given lectures and even did a speaking tour back in the motherland in both Kapampangan and Tagalog on this exact issue a few years ago. And just a heads up, in today's video, I'll be using Tagalog and Filipino, these terms interchangeably, because in linguistics, if you look at it, experts agree that Filipino, or the official language of the Philippines, is really just the standardized dialect of Tagalog spoken in Manila, the dialect of the capital. So unknown to many, native languages in the Philippines are dying not because they're not good enough, but because we've been taught that they're not worth enough. In fact, millions of Filipinos to this very day would say, oh, Bisaya, Kapampangan, Ilocano, Pangasinan, Waray, Tausug, Magindanaon, those are just dialects. They're not languages. But that word itself, dialect, carries a hidden judgment that most Filipinos don't even realize. So calling them dialects makes it sound like they're just broken or lesser versions of the so-called real languages like English or Filipino, aka Tagalog. And once that belief takes root, whole generations quietly let go of their own ancestral mother tongues. So think of it this way. Imagine your language as your family home. Tagalog and English are the shiny new houses everyone's praising, while your native language feels like the old, run-down ancestral home that everyone's ashamed of. Eventually, people stop visiting. They stop maintaining it. And before long, that house, the heart of your culture, starts to crumble. Now, this is not accidental. In fact, it's very systematic. Our education system in the Philippines was shaped by centuries of colonial rule, and it convinced Filipinos that success only speaks English or Tagalog, that everything else was branded as backwards or provincial, or sometimes baryotic. And that's why many Bisaya, Tausug, Kapampangan, or Pangasinan speakers grew up believing that their own native languages were embarrassing or even worthless. But the truth is, your language, your native language, is not inferior, but it is being silenced. And that is exactly the problem. Because when we elevate and impose certain languages over the others, we end up ignoring a whole treasure trove of knowledge that each language possesses. Or in the case of the Philippines, that's 187 languages. I mean, just imagine the depth of meaning and the wealth of knowledge that we lose when we treat only a few of them as worthy of preservation, as worthy of being official. But recognizing that systemic problem, that systemic erasure, is also in a way quite empowering. Because once you see it clearly, then you can choose to protect it, to protect and celebrate our native languages, and proudly rebuild that ancestral home. Now, there are many reasons why our native languages in the Philippines are fading away. And once you know them, then you'll see clearly how we can all help break the cycle. So first is mislabeling them and devaluation. As mentioned earlier, calling a language a dialect instantly makes it seem second class. Think about how we talk about progress or national identity and national unity in the Philippines. It is always framed in Filipino, a.k.a. Tagalog, or even in English. But Cebuano, Kapampangan, Waray, Tausug, Ilocano, Ibanag, and so many others, they're portrayed as obstacles to modernity, obstacles to unity, rather than valuable parts of our people's diversity. And over time, this subtle labeling teaches generations of Filipinos that our native languages, apart from Tagalog, is not really worth saving. And second is the colonial legacy in our language policies. Now, I actually have an entire video dedicated to the history of English-only policies in the Philippines, so make sure to watch it after this video. But for now, here's the summary. By teaching us English alone, the Americans created a gap between our people and our roots. Unknown to many, the education system in the Philippines under the Americans was actually called an industrial one. Schools were designed to produce products and obedient workers, not really critical thinkers, and English became the primary medium of instruction, while our own native languages were actively discouraged or literally banned. My Lola Feli from Manila and Pangasinan would tell me stories that, back in the 1930s, they got physically punished in schools for speaking Pangasinan or even Tagalog. They were only allowed to speak in the proper pre-World War II American School English accent. And honestly, nothing much has changed since then. These colonial policies stuck with us. And even today, Filipino education mostly centers around Tagalog and English, continuing to push native languages aside, other than Tagalog. And most institutions in the Philippines only recognize very few of our native languages, a very few of our 187 languages, leaving the vast majority unsupported. And lastly, urbanization and pop culture also reinforce this loss. As millions of Filipinos move to cities for better opportunities, Tagalog becomes the practical choice for daily life. TV shows, music, news, and even online content are mostly in Taglish. And English speakers are always portrayed as wealthy, educated, and powerful. Meanwhile, those who speak Bisaya, Ilocano, or Kapampangan are often reduced to comic relief or lower-class characters, reinforcing both English and Taglish as status symbols. And for millions of Filipinos overseas, letting go of their native language often feels necessary for fitting in, leading many to struggle connecting with their own grandparents, unable to fully communicate across generations. So speaking of grandparents, let me tell you a story, a personal story that shows an example of how our languages or native languages are fading away even within our own homes. So if you're new to my channel, I have mixed ancestry. I'm part Tagalog, Kapampangan, Pangasinan. I have ancestry from the Aitas, from the Mestizo roots. And, going through a school system that shapes most of these cultures, used to make me feel ashamed of my own identities, of my own roots. It used to make me feel embarrassed of speaking in Kapampangan. In fact, I used to think that Tagalog was the language of respect, while Kapampangan was the language of the uneducated. Because we were taught in schools that English was the language of the educated, and next to it was Tagalog, but not the rest of the so-called dialects. And because of this, when I was younger, back when I was in grade school, I used to think that I thought that speaking Tagalog to my Kapampangan grandparents was showing them respect, but it was actually not. So at schools, we were taught that Tagalog was the proper language. Meanwhile, Kapampangan was the so-called dialect of the ignorant. And even though I could understand Kapampangan perfectly, I kept talking to my Kapampangan grandparents in Tagalog. And I can see them struggling to speak in Tagalog. Even though I understood Kapampangan, I just kept talking to them in Tagalog because I thought that I was showing them respect. I thought I was being polite. But now I realized that it was in fact disrespectful. It was not their mother tongue. Imagine being my grandparents, trying to tell me stories, share wisdom, and teach me our traditions. But they're forced to do it in a language that was not fully theirs. So in reality, each Tagalog sentence created this invisible wall. And behind it, a wealth of knowledge that stayed trapped. Knowledge that they would have happily and easily shared if only I spoke back in Kapampangan. But no, I thought I was being polite, so I kept speaking in Tagalog. Now, luckily, I quickly learned the error of my ways. I quickly realized my mistakes. So luckily, I was raised by culture bearers who knew how to write in Baybayin and Kulitan. And it was through mastering writing in Baybayin and Kulitan at an early age that made me realize how rich and vibrant each of our mother tongues are. Like for example, some of my favorite Kapampangan words are luwalu, the moral duty to defend and uplift the most vulnerable, or ikabus, the act of liberating the enslaved and the exploited. These are indigenous values that guided our ancestors' understanding of justice. But if you think about it, this was not only my experience. It's actually happening everywhere, like in the Aita Magindi community in Central Luzon, in both Zambales and Pampanga. In fact, younger generations of indigenous peoples across the Philippines now speak Filipino or Tagalog, losing access to their own traditional songs, stories, and even traditional medicinal knowledge passed down for centuries. And these were the result of generations of colonial education, teaching us to feel ashamed of our own mother tongues. Losing a language is not just about losing words. It is about losing entire worlds, the rituals, traditions, and wisdom embedded within our own languages, wisdom we inherited from our ancestors. It is important for us to understand why reclaiming our mother tongues is essential, because language is deeply tied and deeply embedded to how we see the world, to how we see the universe. And if you think about it, in every conversation in our mother tongue, in every conversation in our ancestral language, it helps keeps our identities alive. It helps keeps our cultures alive. It honors our grandparents. It reconnects us to the vibrant heritage and history that we nearly lost. And if you ask me, that is something worth fighting for. So think about the lullabies that your parents used to sing to you as a child. Think of the traditions your elders did during special occasions. Now imagine never hearing those again. Imagine never seeing those again. Not because they're forgotten, but because nobody speaks the language anymore. So when a language dies, these rituals and lullabies disappear forever, and with them, a connection that generations of our ancestors carefully preserved. So it is deeper than just our memories. Our native languages shapes who we are, and losing it means losing a part of ourselves. Now again, growing up, I felt ashamed speaking Kapampangan because our schools taught us that only Tagalog and English were the languages worth knowing. I didn't realize it back then, but speaking only in Tagalog and English pulled me away from who I really am. And this is true for millions of Filipinos, children today who grew up feeling embarrassed of their native languages, thus losing a vital part of their roots. And if we think about it, words carry meaning beyond their literal translations. For example, look at the word salamat. It doesn't just mean thank you. It comes from the word salam, meaning peace in Arabic. So when we say salamat, we're actually wishing someone peace, safety, and good health. So when a language fades, it doesn't just vanish quietly. It takes with it our rituals, stories, deeper connections, and entire ways of seeing the world and understanding the universe. So if you think about it, protecting our languages means protecting our memories, our identities, our cultures, and our very souls. But here's a powerful truth. Our native languages are not truly lost. It's not too late. Our native languages are just waiting for us to appreciate them again, to celebrate them again. They're just waiting for us to speak them again. And even if you've forgotten most of your words, even if you were not raised to speak in your native language, it is not too late. You haven't lost your voice. Across the Philippines, language revival is already happening. Many institutions and grassroots organizations are leading the way by creating resources, stories, and spaces online to make our native languages vibrant again. And throughout the Philippines and across the diaspora, people are producing children's books in their mother tongues, ensuring that our ancestral wisdom survives and reaches younger generations. And even in schools, in 2012, the Philippines implemented the Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education, or MTBME, a program which supported teaching in 19 local languages. Although sadly, it has been suspended since 2024, it was still a crucial step. It was not perfect, but proof that change is possible. And young people, just like many of you, are stepping up. All over social media, from TikTok to YouTube, indigenous youth across the Philippines and across the diaspora are proudly performing songs, sharing stories, and teaching phrases in their native languages. They're showing us that our mother tongues are not outdated, that they're vibrant, powerful, and full of life. Now for me personally, rediscovering my roots through writing in Baybayin, in the Tagalog Baybayin, and in the Kapampangan Kulitan script was deeply healing. It connected me to my grandparents. It helped me have deeper connections to my ancestors. In fact, it made me proud of who I am. It made me realize how special my roots are. Just learning one thing at a time, slowly but surely, helped me reclaim my roots. It helped me reclaim my culture. In fact, it helped me embrace my identity. It helped me feel empowered. And the thing is, you can do it too. We must remember that language survival does not require us to be perfectly fluent. In fact, if you think about it, it starts small. One word, one story, one conversation at a time. You do not need to be an expert today. You just need to begin. Because every word we speak, every word is a reminder that our languages, our mother tongues, our cultures, our identities matter deeply. Pero wait lang, Kuya Kirby. What exactly can we do today? What can we do right now to help keep our languages alive? Well, the short answer is, don't panic, it's organic. But seriously though, don't get overwhelmed. Don't panic. Start small, start organically. Like, ask your elders how to say one phrase in your family's mother tongue. It could be good morning or how are you? And trust me, that one moment alone, that one moment of connection can open up a lifetime of stories. Just like when I started speaking Kapampangan to my Kapampangan grandparents. Suddenly, my eyes were opened to this deeper culture, to these deeper traditions that I took for granted. You can also look up, one word from a dictionary, one proverb, or even an old lullaby from your own roots. And the thing is, you just need to practice it. Say it out loud. Practice it daily. And again, you don't have to be perfect. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just learn something new every day. Use your native language in a message, a caption, or even a voice recorder. Because in reality, languages survive and live and thrive when we use them daily, even casually. Because each tiny act reconnects us to our roots. Every word heals old wounds. And every time we try, keeps our cultures thriving. In fact, every time we say it out loud, keeps the voices of our ancestors alive. Now back to that ancient saying, that ancient proverb from our ancestors. In Tagalog, ang hindi marunong magmahal sa sariling wika ay mas masahol pa sa hayop at malansang isda. Or in Kapampangan, masalingangalyang epalak king lanam ning mebelasang ing taong alam pakamal king amano ng siswan. If you do not want to be worse than a savage beast, if you do not want to smell worse than the stench of a rotten fish, then learn how to love your mother tongues. Learn how to appreciate our native languages. Learn how to speak them today. And again, it's never too late to learn. It's never too late to start. So if you want to learn more and dig deeper, if you're interested in more discussions about our people's histories, cultures, and everything in between, make sure to watch my other videos on this channel or get copies of any of my books, coloring books, ebooks, and merch in the links below. Maraming salamat po or hindi mapangandakal pong salamat kay Hongan and in Pangasinan, balbalagya salamat. See you next time or in Tagalog kita kits and in Kapampangan, Mikitix and in Binisaya, kita aita.